Ever thought about how two people from completely different worlds could end up fighting the exact same enemy? Today, we're looking at two incredible thinkers. One saw the battle lines drawn by money. The other saw them drawn by birth. This is the story of their two very different battles for one single goal: equality. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll meet our two main players. Then, we'll dig into how each of them diagnosed the root problem in their own societies. After that, we'll look at how they challenge the systems of power, what they propose to fix things, and finally, why their ideas are, maybe more important now than ever before. All right, let's set the stage. We're talking about a global fight against injustice, and our two protagonists are separated by time, by geography, but they are totally united in their purpose. This is it. This is the fundamental question that drove both Karl Marx and Periyar E.V. Ramasamy. It sounds simple, right? But the answer to this question, well, it reveals everything about how our societies are built and where the deepest cracks of inequality really are.
When you really boil it down, the answers usually fall into two big buckets. On one side, you've got power that comes from money, from capital, from what you own. And on the other side, you have power that's just handed to you the moment you're born: your social status, your family, your identity.
And get this, just look at the context here. Marx was born in 1818, right in the middle of Europe's Industrial Revolution. But then, more than 60 years later and thousands of miles away, Periyar was born into a totally different world, colonial South India. I mean, they were products of such different circumstances, yet they both ended up seeing the same patterns of oppression. It's pretty amazing. So, how did each of them figure out what the core problem was? You can think of them like doctors trying to diagnose a sickness in society. They first had to find the source. For Marx, looking at the factories and cities of 19th century Europe, the diagnosis was obvious. The disease was economic. He called it capitalism. He saw society splitting into two basic groups: the owners, who had all the capital and got incredibly wealthy, and the workers, who had nothing to sell but their own labor just to get by. Now, for Periyar, looking at Indian society, the problem wasn't mainly about money. It was social. The sickness was the caste system, a rigid hierarchy where your entire life, your value, your dignity was decided for you the second you were born. It was an inequality that was literally part of your identity. So here's the crucial difference. Marx saw the whole world through the lens of class. He basically said, look, as long as a tiny few control all the money, real freedom for everyone else is just an illusion. But Periyar, he saw the world through the lens of dignity. For him, talk about freedom was totally meaningless if a person was denied basic self-respect just because of who their parents were. Okay, so it's one thing to identify the problem, but how in the world do you challenge systems that have been around for centuries? For both of these guys, it meant going head-to-head with some really powerful institutions that were holding everything in place. And this is where we find this really fascinating connection. Both Marx and Periyar pointed to organized religion as a huge force that often propped up the status quo instead of challenging it. They both saw it as a tool for control. You've probably heard this famous line from Marx, but it's not just a simple dismissal. What he meant was that religion acts like a painkiller. It brings comfort to people who are suffering, sure, but in doing so, it kind of numbs them to the real source of their pain, which for him was the economic system that was exploiting them. Periyar was even more direct. He basically took the core belief of many religions, that everyone's equal in the eyes of a creator, and he turned it into a weapon. He argued that any religious text that justified the caste system was an insult to logic, to reason, and even to the idea of God itself. So they had different diagnoses, but a common critique of authority. What did they actually propose we do about it? How did they see us getting to a better, more equal world? And here, their strategies were worlds apart. Marx called for a full-blown economic revolution. The goal? Change who controls the wealth. Let the workers own things collectively. Periyar, on the other hand, called for a social and an intellectual revolution. His tools were education and rational thinking, creating what he called a self-respect movement. His goal wasn't to change who controls the wealth, but to fundamentally change how humans see each other. And this all brings us to the most important question, really. Why are we still talking about two thinkers from different centuries, from different continents? Why does any of this still matter so much today? Well, despite all their differences, their core beliefs were so powerfully aligned. Both of them were totally fearless in challenging these massive, entrenched power structures. Both of them stood without apology with the oppressed.
And crucially, they both got that real equality isn't about small symbolic gestures. It has to be baked into the very structure of society.
So, what's the big takeaway from their separate but connected fights? They gave us the tools to see and to question the two main ways that power is used to keep people down. You can think of it like this. They gave us two essential lenses to see the world. Marx gives us the lens to spot economic injustice, to ask, who's profiting here? Periyar gives us the lens to spot social injustice, to ask, who gets to be seen as superior and why? And to really see the whole picture of inequality, you absolutely need both. And in the end, their combined message is incredibly powerful. Economic justice without social dignity is hollow. I mean, you can have money but still be treated with disrespect. And social dignity without economic justice is fragile because poverty can crush anyone's freedom. One just isn't complete without the other.
So that leaves us with this final, really important question for our own world today. As we all try to build a more equal society, we have to ask ourselves, are we only fighting on one of these fronts when we really need to be fighting on two?